A new report from The Intercept's Aline Brown found that the police force guarding the construction of an oil pipeline in Minnesota have participated in multiple trainings with the company behind the controversial energy project. The records obtained by The Intercept shed new light on the level of coordination between law enforcement agencies and the Canadian oil company to police the Indigenous-led movement to stop Line 3. Student, environmental activist, and Two-Spirit Indigenous member Quiiroi Co has been a vocal critic of Enbridge and joins us now to discuss. Quiiroi, welcome to the program. So Quiiroi, what has the police presence been at some of the protest encampments?
So the clip that you just showed was us at the governor's house, but at the camps, they've been so incredibly militarized that it's gotten out of hand. We have been stopped by the police in a span of 24 hours 4 times before, pulled over for the smallest of things, sometimes just to do safety check-ins is what they're calling it. However, the police force at camp is so severe that they will go across the river, go into the trees, and take photos of us. We have lights set up so that way we can see when there's photographing from the other side. We've spotted them kind of trying to come around corners in camps. They were in camps taking pictures of some of Indigenous children, some still breastfeeding and still in diapers. We've had the militarization of one time seeing 4 different paddy wagons and having 4 different counties, some an hour and a half away from the county that we're in, show up just to have a presence.
Now, let me ask you, how widespread is the opposition to this line? Obviously, you're a representative of a group that's been very vocal, but do you find outside of your community there's growing opposition, and how strong does that look?
It's very interesting because when you leave Minnesota, or even leave parts where the pipeline is being built, it's almost like it doesn't exist. It's almost like people think that it's only going to affect the people where it's being built, and that's just not true. I've said this 1,000 times, but this is our clean water. Minnesota is the land of lakes. This is where all our freshwater aquifers are. If it gets destroyed, which it will when the pipeline spills, it's going to affect everyone. And once you leave Minnesota, it doesn't exist. I went to DC and I held a protest and organized a protest in DC before I came back. And the turnout for that in comparison to other protests that I've helped organize was so much lower. And it wasn't due to lack of using those same methods. It's just so hard to get this information out because social media is cracking down so hard on the people who are spreading this information.
Well, a special account set up by the state of Minnesota has distributed $2.3 million in Enbridge funds to public safety agencies so far. Just this week, a 3-judge panel of the appellate court dealt a major blow to protesters and upheld a state water quality and wetland permit for the construction of Line 3, saying that the Minnesota Court of Appeals Section 401 certificate is not affected by legal error and is supported by substantial evidence in the record. Quiiroi, it just seems like everyone's against you on this. You've got the law enforcement, judges, social media, as you mentioned. It just seems like everything is always set up to go to benefit business, right? The policing is always to benefit property and businesses, and the judges are always protecting businesses. I mean, are you guys how are you guys still pressing forward? How's your morale, I guess, on this as you keep seeing these big entities coming at you or blocking you?
Sometimes the things that we have to remind ourselves is that Indigenous joy is resilience. After 500 years of colonization, to be able to stand up today is amazing. They wanted us dead 500 years ago and we're still here. And so it's really important for people to understand sometimes we do take a day off from protesting and, hopping fences and, allegedly chaining ourselves down to things. Sometimes we just play volleyball. Sometimes we just find community. We hold ceremony. It's so important for us to be able to practice our cultural rights because they're healing for us. They're so, so important. We'll hold sweat lodges and, different ceremonies and find our community, and we come closer. And when you have such a strong sense of community at these camps, when you have people who aren't scared to lean on each other, because you have to, you find that things get a lot easier when you have those people.
It seems like this is going to be something that ultimately comes down at the presidential level. So what kind of indications have you gotten from the Biden administration that they're engaged on this issue?
So we created a document that was like a master document, and we have sent it to Biden multiple times. We also created a large resist bot texting service that'll send messages to your congressmen, your representatives, your senators, your everyone, including Biden. And Biden has been sending like generic response emails being like, us at the Biden administration, we're set for change. We want a green future for America. Not even addressing the pipeline. They have no interest in, doing anything about this. The stopping of, Dakota Access Pipeline should have just been the first step, but it seems like it's the only step they want to take.
Even in the face of everything we're seeing, in New York, Brooklyn is seeing like biblical scenes of flooding. I think we have some of that here. Lake Tahoe is being evacuated. There are tornadoes ripping through the Mid-Atlantic. Annapolis got shredded by one. Have you had any ability to try to get through to people on a climate level, or are you finding that the spoilage of the wetlands and the Mississippi River is connecting more with people?
It's very interesting because when I talk about this, I always come from it from an Indigenous rights point, because that's what this is to me. But I also try to talk about it from the climate change. And I talk about how mussels are so incredibly important, and there's so many specific and endangered mussels inside the Mississippi River and its tributaries, and they're dying. They're boiling themselves to death in their shells. The water level in the Mississippi, because they take the water to drill and then they contaminate the water so it can't go back into the Mississippi, is so low that it's causing effects that are butterfly effect, just a small little bit. We are watching monarch butterflies go extinct. Milkweed is going extinct because it grows on the banks of the Mississippi. And as we're watching these things happen, I know what the bigger effect is. And I know that's climate death for all of us. People think this is just Indigenous people that are going to be affected. Well, the pipeline doesn't go through my land. It's not my problem. It's going to be all of our problems. You cannot drink oil. That will never change.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is leading an effort calling for urgent intervention from the president to stop the project. And let me ask you, have you had any luck working with members of Congress? I know you said you submitted a letter to the president and to the White House. Have you felt like you've had support there?
So on a congressional level, we've had a few people who have been we want to get involved and we want to help. But those big faces that everybody knows, they just seem to want to walk the fence of in between. A lot of people aren't trying to stick their neck out, because it comes down to playing that popularity game. And a lot of people seem to think that this tar sands pipeline is a good thing. They seem to think that, Canadian oil being sold abroad and then, destroying our water here in the US is a good thing. So a lot of, congressmen have sent back letters to us and been like, oh, but, we have to find a balance of, the US needs its oil. And we can't, say no to these things. This is creating jobs. So a lot of them have kind of sent back really questionable responses where they just don't seem to be informed on what the pipeline is.
And my understanding is that this weekend, some members of the squad will be heading up to protest at the line, and so that might bring some media attention to this issue. There were years that went by on Dakota Access where it was barely getting any attention at all until it finally rose to the level where there was eventually a national conversation around it and a presidential decision. So maybe that will help move it in that direction. But Corey, thanks so much for joining us, and hope you'll come back again soon to keep us updated on this.
Thank you so much for your time today.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.